Hey everyone, welcome to New Slang. I am your host, music journalist Thomas Mooney, and today I'm joined by singer-songwriter, Oklahoma legend Mike McClure. It was really great talking with Mike about a week or two back. He has this new album coming out at the end of this week, Friday, September 25th, called Looking Up, and it really finds him in a great place. It's really like one of these giant moment of clarity type albums. You know, back in the early 2000s, Mike was releasing new records at this like really crazy, frantic speed. And it was really, really great because you had all this new music from him. He had so much to say right after the breakup of the Great Divide. And he kept up that pace, releasing all these albums and collaborations for a long time. And that's what kind of makes Looking Up so different. This album right here is the first album that he's released in 5 years. The last being that excellent live album with Cody Canada called Chip and Ray. This new album, you feel like this giant exhale. It's really like resetting the dial and recalibrating on what's really important and getting everything in his life more right. We talk about a lot of that during this interview, so I won't necessarily focus so much on it here, but you know, these last few years have been rough on Mike, and he's had to make some changes in his life, and those have really gotten him into a better place as a whole. You know, it's one of those things where it's always a journey and not the destination. But you can hear in this interview and in these songs, Mike is really finding his way onto a path where there's just greener pastures. Looking Up sees Mike really doing some soul-searching and self-examination and acknowledgement. You hear it in those songs like Orion and Distractions, You're Kinda Blue, and that anthem opener, I Am Not Broken. And on one of my favorite songs, which actually you can find on that live album with him and Cody, is the song Holiday Blown. That song is just so heavy, but it's also in that pocket of what I would really call like the epitome of the Mike McClure sound. That mix of country twang, the grooving rock and roll, those sharp hooks, and that even sharper storytelling. Today's presenting sponsor is Desert Door Texas Soto. If you know anything about me, it's probably that I'm from the heart of West Texas and absolutely love everything about West Texas. And that's really why I love Desert Door so much. You may be asking yourself what exactly Soto is. Well, it's a premium spirit that's similar to a tequila or a mezcal. But for my money, it's a little bit more refined and smooth. There's a sweetness and faint hints of vanilla and citrus. And it's also as versatile as your garden variety vodka. At its core, Desert Door is authentically West Texas. They go out and harvest Soto plants from the wild and bring them back to their distillery over in Driftwood, Texas. So next time you're at your local liquor store, get a bottle of Desert Door. For more info, check this episode's show notes. Before we get started, I have some other news for New Slang. I've kicked the tires on the New Slang Patreon, and I've set up a few tiers so y'all can subscribe to if you feel so inclined. Just a quick rundown on that. For $3 a month, you'll get episodes that are ad-free. For $5, you'll get ad-free episodes, and then also be part of the New Slang Monthly Show Postcard Print Club. For $10, it's those ad-free episodes, the postcard prints, and other New Slang merch. And for $15, it's all those things and some old unheard interviews from the past. If you're interested in seeing what those postcard prints look like, they're really just plastered all over the social media right now. For more information, check out the links in the show notes. All right, here is Mike McClure. Yeah, you got this. Or let's go ahead and just go on with what we were talking about right there. Those live shows and like the pandemic and having to. Long story short, I mean, like, this record that you have coming out, it's been a minute since the last record, and then you add in this pandemic, you add in all this extra time. What has that done for you as far as getting this record out? Like, how has this big pause affected the release of this record?
Well, I think it's affected it in a positive way. I know so much about all the COVID and everything else that's going on in the world is having such a negative impact. But as far as for this record of mine, I had a chance to come off the road, which I haven't done since I was 21 years old. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm 49 now. I can't do the math, but that's a while. And but to be able to come off of the road and just stay in the same spot, and then to have a studio in my house at a place I was, quarantined to, there was no excuse not to make a record this time. There wasn't any distraction as far as, get in the groove of working on it. And then, I got to run to Illinois, do a string of shows. And then I'm going to be out for 2 weeks. And, life just gets hectic. And so to be able to sit in one spot was really cool for that aspect of it. And we got to sit, and I've had just a ton of songs over the years. I hadn't put a record out in 5 years, but I've always been writing, but never specifically really writing to say, okay, I'm putting a record together. It just started to become something that I just did. And my favorite part of the whole process still is the writing and pulling something out of thin air, and then getting it down, recording it, and getting all that stuff, and marketing. That's all a different part of the beast. But my favorite part of it is the writing. So I kind of got a little lazy on the end of putting records out. So I was thankful to, that I got to shut down and to approach it every day. We'd get up and say, okay, let's work on this record and make sure the songs had some cohesion to them. Where before, some of my records have been all over the map, which, of course, in my life, I have been all over the map.
Yeah. Well, talking with a lot of bands, I think I've talked with mostly bands who had recorded before the shutdown, and that put a big thing on when they were going to release a record, and should they postpone it? Should what with all that? But it seems like with you, this gave you the a pause to really focus on actually making it. Like, hey, this is a great time to
it gave me a pause to be able to get all my shit together, as opposed to, here's 3 pieces of some songs. The drummer can't come in this week, and I've got to go play in Lubbock, and so it just allowed some, I guess, concentrated focus would be a good way to put it, to where it was something that I didn't have that. And then, and I was concerned that we did a Kickstarter, and I didn't know how that would pan out, seeing it's in a pandemic, and not knowing how many people were affected by that and how many people, would support the thing. And I was blown away. We made almost $30,000 on that. And that's a heck of a lot of support from people out there in a tough time. So that was, that's humbling when you see that, because, that basically the people become the record label. Before you get signed to a record label, they'd pay for the records, and they'd pay for the press, and they would pay for this and that. And that's just been kind of taken over by the people, which in a way is really beautiful. It worked out in my case.
Yeah. Like what I love so much about that is it's a lot of people trusting you. You know what I mean? And also vice versa. You're putting a whole lot of trust in you're dispersing the, I don't want to say responsibility, but you know what I mean? Like, it's what I've always told people is, you got to treat it like you're pre-ordering a record, and there's going to be a lot of really great stuff that you can get added onto it, whether it's, artwork or lyrics or vinyl or, t-shirts and all the other cool shit that people love.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really cool to see. And again, I never did a Kickstarter before. So the whole thing was a new process for me. I'd seen other friends do one, and, to varying levels of success. And I guess there was that little bit of fear at first, like, oh man, is the net really going to appear if we leap?
Right.
And it did. And, that just makes me want to do more, and and we thought about as far as releasing and not being able to tour, but I really think once we get through this COVID-19 business, I think live shows are just going to have a boom, just because nobody's got to go see them.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen too is there's going to be some greater appreciation because it's. I think we all kind of took it as a given, especially someone like you being able to playing every weekend and me going out and seeing shows.
That's where the majority of my money came from.
Right, but as far as a fan base goes, I think we've all and we've all been to shows where we didn't necessarily pay attention to the band as much as we probably should have, and I think that at the end of this, you're going to see a better and bigger appreciation from fan bases, even just the casual listener of not just taking live music for granted anymore, or at least for a minute.
Yeah, for at least 2 to 3 weeks, and then they'll be right back taking it for granted. No, I'm hopeful for that, and it's another side of the coin too, being somebody that plays for people and not being able to. You can to a degree on the video, Facebook Live show or something, but it's not the same. It's really not. It's something new, and it was interesting for a while, but honestly, I miss that contact of playing to people that are in the same space,
Yeah, well, it's I've kind of joked around with a bunch of songwriters going oh, you kind of miss that drunk guy at the bar who's talking over.
I don't miss him.
But yeah, because there is this different thing. You end the song and there's no applause, and you see.
Yeah, it's even more awkward than in person.
Yeah, you lean over and you're trying to read the Facebook comments, and
yeah.
It's such a weird.
Yeah, my girlfriend pointed out how ridiculous I look trying to. I forget that they're watching me trying to read, squinting, leaning over awkwardly.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I might be done with those. Like this Kickstarter, we put, a lot of our savings into the thing, just kind of banking on hitting the Kickstarter. So that's allowed me a little bit of breathing room, at least till until it's safe to go out and safely draw people together.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of these songs on this record, they're songs about sobriety and you're kind of just rebooting yourself and kind of finding yourself after kind of being lost there for a second.
If by decade you mean a couple decades, yeah.
Well, what is it? What's the cathartic process been for you as far as writing these songs and finding your balance and your center?
Well, I was in a marriage for 21 years up until about 2 years ago, and it wasn't a healthy relationship for either of us, and I think we were both in just bad spots. And so after getting out of that, and then I ran into a girl, this friend of mine who we actually worked together back in the early 2000s, and we're just good friends. And she happened to be single at the same time, and we started hanging out. And I just fell madly in love with her, and her name's Kristlyn Lawrence, and she's a photographer and a writer and an artist, and she'd spent about 3 years before we ran into each other really centering herself as far as through yoga, meditation, and becoming a more centered person and cutting away burning off the driftwood of parts of her life that wasn't working for her. And she helped me get started on that process, as far as really taking a good look. And I quit drinking. I've got about a year and some change in on that. And what I was doing was pouring alcohol on top of problems that I should have been fixing my whole life, whether it be emotional growth or, dealing with insecurity or some sort of, just not growing up. My job allowed me to not grow up for a long time. You were expected to be about half drunk and be the life of the party. That back in the Great Divide days I'm talking about. That just kind of carried over. And I think my emotional growth, not to get too woo-woo on you, but I just think it was stunted by that. And so through this album is basically my, like you said earlier, reboot. It was a reboot back to, all right, what do I need to work on? And started working on those things. And she was the right person to give me the right push and call me out on the carpet when I needed to, but not in a way that would get us into an even bigger fight.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of songs about love on this record. There's a tune called A Little Bit of Love, and it's just, we wrote it together, and it's just kind of the story of that happening. And I know some people might be going, uh-oh, he's falling in love. He's going to put one of those albums. But, yeah, there's more to it. There's that aspect, which I say slops over, but into all the other parts of my life, as far as, finding love and looking inside, learning to love myself. I think us as a society there's some self-loathing in there that could be addressed. There's some of that, and definitely addiction. I didn't know how addicted I was till I quit doing it. And then I just had to basically reshape my life around, something different. And, I wasted a lot of time just sitting in a corner somewhere getting hammered. And, I'm not going to sit and say that a lot of that wasn't fun, but it got to a point where it was hindering any kind of growth for me. So the setting it down really gave me some power, as far as like some personal power, as far as, okay, if I can do that, I can do this, and I can stay focused long enough to get a record out instead of recording 70 pieces of songs that may not ever see the light of day. And I think as an artist, that's important to dig inside, find the things that you're working on, try to make them make some sense, and then putting them out into the world to where they can help other people make some sense of similar problems. We're all pretty similar.
Right. Yeah.
When you get down to it.
It's one of those things where, as a songwriter, I think like one of the biggest keys to songwriting is that sense of empathy, in finding it in people and finding it in yourself, and to relate those messages to other people. But then, juxtaposed to that, being the front man, being the artist, the singer, it's almost like the opposite. It's almost like that's so much more self-indulgent, right? And there's so many songwriters where like those two thoughts come together, and sometimes it deters the art, or it deters the songwriting, and it can ruin people's lives or moments in their lives. And I think like you're spot on the self-loathing and the being like uncomfortable on stage, and sometimes like us as fan bases misreading that and misunderstanding.
Yeah, it could come off as aloofness or arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
What's that Dylan song? Mistake my kindness for aloofness.
Yeah.
It was. But yeah, I never wanted to be the front guy. My heroes growing up were Jimmy Page and Keith Richards, and how I'm still alive is a miracle. But for those as role models, but I just wanted to play the guitar and let someone else be a Mick Jagger or a Robert Plant, because that's a different type of person. That's right. Somebody who, like a lot of people who are good at that, crave that. And, I never craved that. If anything, it made me uncomfortable. And Some of it is them showing appreciation towards me, and then me thinking I'm not deserving of that.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome kind of
Yeah,
aspect of, yeah.
yeah.
I think like that's such a, anytime someone's tells you you're great at something, sometimes you're just kind of, or like, why are these people coming? When are they going to pull the rug out? When are they?
Yeah.
The big.
And then I'd like to say, well, you should see me trying to fix my plumbing. You want to see an idiot on parade. It's just something I've always played the guitar since I was 10, for what is that, 39 years? Jesus. And, so that's just always something I've done, and I don't ever think about it as being amazing. It's just like, no, that's just what I do. I'm sure you do something else. And then, and not really wanting to be that character that was Mick Jaggering it up front. And I was drawn to more like Guy Clark, singer-songwriters. Steve Earle, I just thought he was super cool.
Right.
And I'd see Neil Young, I'd see these, it's like, man, they're up there. They're fired up about what they're saying. Not necessarily how well they sing or how good looking they are or whatever. I could just see this different kind of artistry coming through. And that's what I started to relate with. And I think when I was in college in the early 90s, that's when I discovered Steve Earle. And that led me into Texas as far as finding out who Guy Clark was, Robert Earl Keen, all those.
The storytellers, yeah.
Yeah, the really great writers. And that's what I always wanted to be. And it's been an interesting balance of wanting to be that, but not wanting to really be the guy who's trying to grab everybody's attention in a room.
Yeah.
So I've struggled with that over the years. And honestly, before COVID hit, about the last year, I was really starting to feel a good groove because I'd shifted away from playing loud bars with a loud rock band into, okay, here I am with just my acoustic guitar and these songs. And I was playing more house concerts, more listening rooms. And, it was a different approach. And I was starting to feel really comfortable with that. Like, all right, this kind of feels like what I need to be doing. And I don't know if it's whether I'm almost 50 now and I don't want to go hang out in a bar, or it's just that it's just part of being the storyteller, songwriter, and being able to communicate with an audience without having to crank up the decibels.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where obviously like going and seeing a bar band, that's very special and they can be special. But, when you go into a setting like that, there's 100 different reasons why 100 people came in that night. When it's a house show or like
right.
a venue, there's really like one reason why they came, and it was intentional that they came to hear songs by that artist. So I think it has to be a little bit more easy to, I don't know, like
connect.
You're able to connect with those people and understand the reason that they're there.
Yeah,
and not have to be like the center of attention because it's given that the songs are there.
Yeah, which makes me even more nervous being the center of attention. But
yeah, but I think that what I find so interesting, and I guess like has been one of my biggest revelations, is covering all this music scene for so long and talking with all you artists, is that it's an interesting thing where I guess like what my intention as a journalist is to like humanize you guys as much as possible. Like you guys are just like everyone else, but the things that you're able to do, that's where the magic is. And the songs are, I guess, like trying to build up the art as like, hey, guys, recognize this is as amazing and special. But like the people behind the music, they're you don't have to worship them as gods, or, you know, whatever the case is.
Yeah, they. I heard a quote a while back, and what you said made me think of it was trust the art and not the artist.
Yeah,
because you know, a lot of us are flawed, but we catch these glimpses of truth and put those out there, and to understand that it's truth that should be followed and respected, and not the person that's really saying it. You know, it's easy to idolize people. I know I have, and I still do, you know, to some degree. That's, I guess that's just human.
Yeah. I think that's part of just human nature, is to look up at certain people, and because you appreciate what they do. I mean, like that's just something that you do. I mean, like it can be Steve Earle, Bob Dylan, or it can be your grandpa for the stuff he did. You know, it's natural to do that, but it's also, I think it's very easy for fan bases to then hold you to who you are on stage, or who they think you are. You know?
Yeah. I went through that I was in the Great Divide for 10 years, from 92 to 2002. And when that imploded and I went solo, I got a big old dose of people wanting you to do something that you're not doing. Exactly, you know, I, for like the first year, just because I was angry at the Great Divide guys, I wouldn't play any of those songs, although I'd written them. And you know, over time, I learned that it's like, don't take that out on the people, you know, just because you have a problem with this small group. And it took me a while to learn. I think everybody goes through that. I know, like Cody Canada's a good bud, and he went through that with Cross Canadian Ragweed, and you know, that just happens.
This episode is in part brought to you by the Blue Light Live here in Lubbock, Texas. While Blue Light is still closed due to the pandemic, there is a way to help A, support Blue Light, and B, get a sense of that normalcy by visiting bluelightlubbock.com, clicking on the merch tab, and getting some koozies, a vast array of t-shirts and caps, and yes, even a Blue Light flag. While it is such a bummer that live music is still on hold right now, I'm telling you, by getting some Blue Light Live merch, you're going to feel better. It just feels better wearing a t-shirt and ball cap and helping support your favorite bar. Again, that's bluelightlubbock.com. Click on the merch tab, get some merch. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, like what's strange, I guess, is like, you know, understanding that like that band for a lot of people was their favorite band, either if it's Great Divide, if it's Ragweed or the Beatles, you know, and it's such an interesting thing, I guess, with band or fan bases just wanting those songs, because like that's what they knew and loved before, and
I guess as like, a soundtrack to their youth.
Yeah. And I guess like what I come to is like, man, you know, it sucks when your favorite band breaks up or goes on a hiatus. But also, I mean, some of the greatest bands were only around for 10 years or even, you know, obviously shorter lengths of time than that. But, you know, Zeppelin didn't last forever, or like I said, the Beatles. I mean, it's rare that a band will be around your entire life. So
yeah, and it's a strange thing for an artist to navigate, you know, as far as like someone's expectations and then what you want to do as an artist, which, you know, what do you stay true to? You know, I think, and that's an individual choice as far as like, well, if you want security, you're probably going to need to play exactly what people want to hear from you. And, but if you want to follow your muse, that can be a completely different path sometimes. And just hope for another crowd. You know, I went from playing to, you know, a few thousand people that were really happy every night to about 30 confused people for a little while, you know, as I was trying to sort out who I was, where I was going, what I wanted to say and how and with who.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how was, I guess, navigating that, like trying to, you know, follow that muse, but also I guess like navigating those waters, uncharted territory.
Yeah, it was for a while. I think I was so mad that because, when bands split up, it gets ugly. And, ours was certainly no exception. And I think I was just so angry, and I was fueled by a new record that I put out, an album called Everything Upside Down. It had 19 songs on it. That's how fired up I was. And, I put that thing out, and I just went out and just pretended like that was the only thing I'd ever done in my life, and just played that. And nobody wants, well, some do, but not many people want to go hear songs that they haven't heard before. And I'm the same way as a consumer, as a listener. If I went to see Neil Young one time, and he was doing Greendale or whatever that was called, and it was a concept record that I'd never heard. I didn't know any of the songs, and I'm just pacing around getting bummed out because I don't know the songs. And so I understand that as a listener, but when you're on the other side of that coin, well, there's Neil. He's got a thing. He's fired up. He wants to do this for a while, and I understand that side too. Navigating those waters is tricky. And as I came to, start reconciling with my own past, like Great Divide songs, I started going, well, I still love this song, and I'll pull this one out, and I'll pull this one out. And, after a while, I got to where I like a lot of these songs. So I started playing them. And, I think if I'd approached it that way at the start, like, it would have been a much easier path. I took the long way around for sure.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about too is, like, you mentioned yoga, and I think that, like, sometimes we fixate so much on when you're writing a song as far as, like, the writing is when you pick up the guitar and the pen and the pad and start writing it down. How much has, like, doing yoga or other things. I guess I read that gardening and stuff like that. How much has that helped the artistic process and helped you become a better songwriter?
It just it takes me out of a place of, like, anxiety. Although anxiety can be good for writing, you can use it as a tool. But a lot of times if I'm not centered, like if I don't take a few minutes a day, stretch, breathe, just get centered, listen to some peaceful kind of music. If I don't do that, my brain starts to run in like 4 or 5 different compartments, working on different problems. And I'm so distracted by that. And I can be easily distracted to where when I've been sitting and breathing and just focusing and moving around mindfully, when I sit down to grab that guitar, I'm in a different state of mind. And I've been writing a bunch. I already got another new record ready. Well, not ready. I'm close. I got about 6 things done. But just it's helped me. And there's a short answer, I guess. It's just helped. For me, it comes down to focus. I'm not so sure. I don't have a little bit of ADHD, but I do have trouble focusing, and this has helped me focus, which in turn is giving me longer periods of time where I am focused. And when I am in that state of mind and I sit down, I'm more apt to get something instead of just 3 or 4 little random parts that may not go anywhere. I'm more apt to stay on point and stay in the zone with it.
Yeah. It's so easy to get wrapped up in things that you feel like you need to worry about that you not necessarily have that you don't necessarily have control over. It's easy to get lost in those woods. And
yeah, I was definitely doing that here even recently, as all the unrest in America and politics and stuff. And then COVID, I just started deep dive, and I never paid attention to the news before. I didn't. And I kind of missed that bliss. And then there was a part of me like going, well, you need to be informed in these times to navigate these waters. But I just caught myself. I had to take all my news apps off my phone, social media, just because I was all the time getting on there and checking it in the name of I'm researching COVID or I'm seeing what's happening with the election or something. But God, I was just wasting too much time on that instead of, once you breathe, you can control this. I can't control what's going on in the world. I can vote, right. But all this stuff I think I was trying to control by knowing about it. And I was filling my head with just, all the sensationalized stuff.
Yeah. It's easy to get lost in the social media too. It's such a, I guess like I'm at an age where all the social media stuff came in my early 20s. So like it's strange where I feel like it's, I don't know, like anytime there's like something new that's happened, changed the world, that first generation is kind of like the experiment. And so like, I don't think like we really understood like the repercussions of getting hooked on social media, the all of that and everything that goes with that. But, what I can't understand, what I'm fearful for is like the generation after us or after me is like, are those people going to be super addicted to their phones and social media, or is there going to be that rebellion at some point of like, we need to, this is harmful. So
right. Have you seen Social Dilemma?
I have not. Is that on?
It's on Netflix.
Okay,
check that out. It's just talking about a lot of that stuff, and it's terrifying. How they just take your information and manipulate a worldview for you, and there's so many different alternate realities going on right now.
Yeah,
it's. I think it's based off of that, and it's scary. And I have kids. My kids will come over, and I'll have them put their phones down because they've got notifications, and that's just a little hit of dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
It's check and see if somebody's liking your image and what you could do to get more likes. And I see it in them, and I'm going to make them sit down and watch that and we'll have a talk about it because it's frightening, man. It really was. I'm not an alarmist by any stretch of the imagination, and I've certainly used social media for my benefit, but I've also noticed it kind of becoming an addiction, and it's designed to be that way so they can keep you on the page for advertising.
Right. Well, it's you're getting onto this whole subject of them kind of catering the news to you, right? Or
right.
the whatever version of that is. And what it is there's a billion echo chambers. There's an echo chamber for each and every one of us out there, and it just feeds into. I think it's human nature to you kind of seek out what you kind of agree with, and so what are you getting fed? But at the very minimal, very very minimal, it's one of those things. It wastes a lot of time, and I find myself doing the, it's 10 till the next hour. Let me just like surf on my phone for a minute, and then that turns into 30 minutes, or whatever the case is, and then you're just like shit. What I wanted to circle back though to is, Great Divide came up in the 90s with a lack of that social media. I think so many artists now are tied to the social media as far as it can warp their sense of getting where they, no one posts anything bad on social media for the most part, and the entire part of like keeping up with the Joneses, and I think that can stunt a whole lot of up and coming new artists. What was it like though without that? Did you ever even worry about like what other bands were doing as far as like, because they're not posting great photos on social media and whatnot. What was it like back then as far as becoming a band that just blew up organically?
Well, I think, our keeping up with the Joneses was looking and seeing like, okay, here's a band. Little Texas got a record deal. I remember some of those guys from running around, and, or Toby Keith got a record deal. I mean, those are not my favorite bands, but, it was somebody that that at the time we would see, or to me, Keeping Up with the Joneses is like the Mavericks. I love the Mavericks, and
yeah,
there's some great music going on, but it was the who had made it to the major leagues, and the major leagues was Nashville. And at the time, that was the model. And the cool thing was we were able to, figure out the model of like, okay, what does a record label do? Well, they have a department that is in charge of press. All right. In our band, it was, okay, Kelly, you're in charge of that. And JJ was in charge of something. Scott was in charge of something else. I ran the newsletter and worked radio, and we just became our own departments, and we approached it like a business. And, by the time we did our second record, we sold like 25,000 copies of our independent release, and we owned it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were doing really great. And then, what's the next brass rung always? And then it was a record deal, and Atlantic came calling because they knew that we were drawing well in Texas and Oklahoma and starting to make a little bit of rattle nationally. We got Lincoln, Nebraska picked us up, but there wasn't any social aspect to it. It was newspaper, it was radio and television, and that was where you marketed your music. And although that was a limited thing, it could be done. It could be figured out. And then, and on the flip side of that, there were great artists that didn't know how to do any of that, and they suffered because of it. And then I think social media came along and got to be real easy for somebody to get exposure. But now there's so many.
Right.
Where do you, how do you, the scope used to be smaller, I guess would be a way to put it.
Yeah. Well, that's like the, I miss like the days of going and finding a record and like having to search for that record,
Yeah.
And, that record, I think it's kind of funny of like the, like, I don't know, like a record from your youth. For me, it was like a Wallflower record, and going and finding that record and being like, okay, you're kind of stuck with that record, even if you don't like it, and you're gonna listen to it.
You'll learn to like it.
Yeah, and all of that kind of stuff. And now it's like it's so easy to just access it all at once, and but you're still like you said, there's that oversaturation of like how. You have everything at your fingertips, and I don't know. It's a different thing. I don't know. It's so weird, and I don't know. It's just weird. Like I said, I don't know.
Well, I feel lucky enough to have had people who have still support me that were around in the beginning. From the early '90s, '92, and. Sometimes somebody will want to hear some old song that's embarrassing to me. It's like someone pulling out a picture of you in the 8th grade going, look how cool you were, man. It's, I don't know.
I wanted to talk to y'all one more time about our new partners at Desert Door and offer up a handful of my favorite ways to drink it. Get you a Mexican Coca-Cola, have a couple of swigs, then pour yourself some Desert Door Oak aged in, toss in a lime wedge or two, or how about this? Pour some Desert Door into a mug, top off the glass with some ginger beer, squeeze in a lime, or for all you ranch water drinkers out there, get you a Topo Chico, take a couple of pulls off, and then pour in some Desert Door. Toss in a couple of lime wedges, and now you have a mighty tasty and refreshing ranch water. Remember, Sotol is as versatile as vodka and has a more refined, smooth, and a more complex palate than tequila. It's rich and balanced, and whatever your go-to drink is, it'll make it that much better. And again, it's inherently West Texas. It tastes like home. For more info on Desert Door, check our show notes. All right, that's it for Thomas Mooney's Cocktail Minute. Let's get back to the show. Something I wanted to ask about related to this too is like I think like we all like now also take for granted the infrastructure of these live venues in Texas and Oklahoma, and back then it was a little bit, there was a whole lot less of that. There was not as many, I guess like the circuit, if you will, of the infrastructure was not as nearly intact. What was it like, I guess, helping kind of establish that you could play here in Texas and Oklahoma and make a living and still be, considered, be proud of like your career,
Yeah, it definitely was. When I started playing out, and when Great Divide started playing out in the early '90s, if you were any kind of a country band, you had to play top 40 if you're going to get work, and because it was all dance halls, and that's the people who hired the bands. That's what they said, and that's what they said went. But we would go in, and being from Stillwater, we played a place called the Wormy Dog Saloon. That was where we started, and it only held like 150 people, and a little upstairs crappy bar. But we started playing there, and knew enough people in town to where we would sell the thing out, and people be waiting in line. Well, people love that. They think, oh, what am I missing? I'll be there the next time. So we gradually just started playing bigger rooms, and when we went down to Texas, I remember going and playing at the White Elephant in the Stockyards the first time. A bunch of people from Stillwater took a bus and came down and went to the show, and we packed that place out. And then it just kind of started. We had a good little fan base going that would show up wherever we'd play, and the bars were open to that. And that, because when you get down to it, all they want to do is sell their beer, and they don't care if you're playing polka music if it's selling. So, we had to make nothing against polka music. I forgot I'm talking to Lubbock. But, we had to make our own way, and it was, honestly, it was really exciting times. It was a time when, I'm going to get up early, and I want to make some calls and get some new clubs. And we were putting press packs together. Back in the old days, it'd be a CD and then a one sheet of this and that somebody could read. And, doing all that on our own, it was wide open. And honestly, there weren't a lot of bands. I went down. Gary P. Nunn was really super cool to us. When we first started, I met him at the Broken Spoke just as a fan, and told him I had a band. We hadn't really done anything. And he said, oh, you need to get with Lloyd Maines. He'll make your record. Speaking of Lubbock. Yeah. And I knew Lloyd Maines' name through Jerry Jeff Walker Records. And so we tracked down Lloyd, and he agreed to do our record in Lubbock. And, man, that really got us rolling. And Gary P., we would go do shows with him, and he introduced us to his crowd. And I would go to Gary P. Nunn shows and walk around with our record once we had it made, just handing them out. I'd find a group at a table and go, oh, you got to listen to this. And that was a fun part of the game. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, like the grassroots.
And I think that when we did finally sign a record deal, it was a little anticlimactic because, we had been at the reins of this thing that was just gaining and getting better all the time. And we handed it over, and they just kind of sat on their hands with it. They threw a little money at it as far as doing some videos and getting some more radio play. But, I think we expected that we'd sign that deal and bam, dark sunglasses and champagne from here on out. But it really was kind of the start of the demise of it. We after we left Atlantic, we went to a smaller label, and I don't know, anytime you do that, it kind of puts off this air of, uh-oh, things are going backwards now.
Yeah, well, it's natural to also do the whole, you have a goal in mind, and once you accomplish that goal, it's like, well, the steam kind of goes out, the air goes out of the room, and
and then I think Great Divide inspired a whole bunch of bands from Ragweed and Jason and all those guys, and man, they come along and made bigger waves than we did. Yeah. And that was cool to see. And, but also, when we were like seemed like we were the only band doing it at the time, it was like, all right, this is going to be this way forever.
Yeah.
You know, and then it back to the original thing was it did help build an infrastructure for not having to go to Nashville. Although we did, you know, we basically made it in Oklahoma and Texas first.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went out and, you know, tried to parlay that into more, and, you know, it maybe made it a little bit bigger, but, you know, I really think that the success of that band was to do it yourself.
Yeah.
It was to me anyway, you know, especially in hindsight. I would have signed a record deal with Atlantic Records if you were going to chop off one of my fingers, maybe back then. You know, but now in hindsight, I haven't done that. I can look back and think, well, the true success was putting the music out we believed in, going out and playing it for the people.
Yeah. Well, you know, like like those infrastructure, I think like that y'all helped establish that. I mean, like, I think that, like you said, like Jason and Cody and all these bands afterwards, Wade, they kind of like all like, you know, saw this trail that you guys had made and go, you know, started reading the signs on the trail and started realizing, oh, hey, here's an out, guys. This is how we do it. This is how you have to do it down here. And in turn, that meant, you know, a lot more bars being set up for music and, you know, I guess like putting in money into sound systems and stuff like that. You know, this is probably a couple of years ago, I was talking with Wade Bowen about, he said he thought like one of the main reasons why that was a big, that put him up a little bit ahead of some of these other bands that were around Lubbock at the time, was that he had a PA system, and that helped like, you know, he could, you know, oh, you got your own sound? Okay, yeah, sure. You know, you can. Yeah,
that's a big expense for a club.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the kind of stuff like the average fan, you don't even think about that, you know, like every bar you go to has like, you know, great sound or sound at least, not necessarily good sound, but you know, all that kind of stuff. That's all part of the thing that you guys helped put those that infrastructure in.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that band. You know, we weren't that great, you know, as individuals, but when we came together, it was fun. And Lloyd Maines really helped us, you know, make our records sound good, because we didn't sound as good as those records sounded for a while. But we eventually caught up to it.
What was Wade like back then?
Lloyd was super instrumental in that, for sure.
Yeah, like what was because obviously he's a Lubbock legend over here, and about this time right there when you guys were working together, that's when he really took off as far as having his fingerprints on this music. What was he like back then as far as what did you I guess like learn like that? One of the bigger takeaways from working with Lloyd.
Oh, I suppose the main takeaway was how to put a record together. You know, I'd never really. The thing is, I liked Lloyd. I still do. I love Lloyd. He's just such a cool guy, and so I was by being drawn to him, you know, as a musician, and respected him, and knew he'd worked with some people I admired. You know, I really listened, and man, he knows how to put them records together, and so that went on for me when Cross Canadian Ragweed wanted to do their 377 album, which was their second album, second studio album. They called me to want to know if I wanted to produce it, and I said, yeah, I think so. And that's because they knew I'd worked with Lloyd and saw, you know, firsthand how he did it. And so I basically just, you know, I learned from that, and then I was able to get work as a producer, you know, because of learning from Lloyd, you know, how to put the thing together. And just he was super hard worker too. He comes from a cotton farming family out in Lubbock, and just hard working, you know. So he really approached it from that, you know, no nonsense sensibility as far as putting some stuff together. Not that it wasn't fun. It was a blast, but just always kept the ball rolling in the studio. And I think that's one of the big things I picked up from him, and not letting people start meandering off on something that's just not helping or not adding.
Yeah.
And so he really, inspired me to go and be a producer on my own. And so I started producing, and that led me to do a lot of other records for people.
Yeah. It's obviously like the producing aspect of creating with another band and helping them and get their vision out. That's all the fun part, but also like the part that people don't want to talk about or don't talk about because it's not necessarily glamorous is that, you're also like a stage manager. You got to you're still like making sure things are running smoothly as far as a time and everything goes, because that's the part that probably gets overlooked when it comes to producing an album is making sure the project is moving along at a reasonable speed.
Yeah, and honestly, if I hadn't got to study under Lloyd, we did 3 albums with him, so I was around him quite a bit of time, and that time really left a mark on me as far as that's what he did. So that's where I learned how to do that, and that's what led me to get jobs because people trusted that I'd get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Well, also this relates to something I was gonna bring up, and that's you've been such a proponent of your contemporaries, the people right behind you. And obviously, in part of that is you helped produce a whole lot of great music that's come out of Oklahoma and Texas. And, I guess how has being such a proponent of up and coming songwriters and artists kept you, I guess, invigorated as an artist yourself and kept things fresh for you?
I think a lot of it goes back to some of the funnest times I had as a younger guy was making those records with Lloyd and the Great Divide, because man, it was exciting and new and I couldn't believe we were doing it. And I don't know if I'm like a psychic vampire. I get to suck off of young people's blood when they come in or something. But in a way, I remember it reminds me of those days. And I feel that all over again, working on a record. And then you get to know the people and they're excited and a lot of them are unsure of themselves. And man, I know all about that, being unsure and helping them, to become more sure of themselves. And that's just through working hard and getting the parts right. And that's been a cool part of it. But that keeps me invigorated, like you said. And then to be able to see the music that we, huddled up a couple of weeks over, going out into the public and making a splash, it's like, wow, look at that. Look at Turnpike Troubadours. Mm-hmm. They came in, I think they paid me in change some days. But I knew I wanted to work with them because I just loved the music and to see them just go out and blow up like that was really cool. And Damn Quails was another one that was fun. And
right.
Yeah. It's just an extension. I think it's kind of like my dad's a coach. He's a football coach or was a football coach my whole life. And, he still eat up by the game. And then, I think in a way it's kind of like a coach gets to relive some of those. Like he had some great memories of playing football as a younger man. And then he gets, it's kind of like a coach, I guess. I never thought I'd be that, but you are kind of coaching the album out of people.
Yeah. I think like that.
Coaxing it gently.
That's a really great comparison. I honestly think like it is like a, part motivational speakers, part disciplinarian as far as, making sure, again, getting things on time, Yeah,
and making sure that the vibe in the room is right,
Right,
if something's like, you never know I've seen everything from fist fights to, people pouring drinks on a board on purpose, and just, and then usually it's something subtle, like somebody's trying to play and they're frustrated, and maybe another bandmate starts giving them shit, which is the wrong time to be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just diffusing little bombs all day long, just try to keep that even keel, which I think with doing yoga and meditation and stuff, I'm going to be even better. I haven't really, since COVID hit, I haven't produced anything. But, I think I'm going to be able to even pay more attention to those things other than, maybe having a cocktail while I'm working. I might miss some sort of subtlety that I needed to pick up on. And I'm excited to do it again. There's a studio in Oklahoma City that's real nice, and a buddy of mine bought it, and he wants me to come do some working out of there. And I think that might be pretty cool to try.
Yeah. Like that's, again, like it goes to being a little bit more, maybe more attentive and, just kind of like reading the situation a little bit better.
Honestly, my girlfriend, Chrislyn, she co-produced my last record with me. She is way better at that stuff than I am. And I sat and I kind of just shut up and I tried to learn something from her.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of thinking that even though I'm a producer, I know how to do this, I've done this and this and that. I didn't come at it like that. I really admire that part of her brain that can really focus and stay focused and keep on the ball. I think that's going to up my game, as far as when I go back to the producer role. What I've learned from sitting with her has been immense, and it's I'm anxious to go. Hell, I want to go record a band today now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, well, make some phone calls.
Answer some.
Yeah, probably more. Yeah. What I wanted to close on here is there's that new Red Dirt book that's coming out by Josh Kretschmer. Yeah. Obviously, you're featured in that kind of this new book and everything. And what's like been your involvement, and B, like what do you think this is gonna do to maybe like spur on young listeners to go back and discover some of the pioneers of
Well, I think he did a really great job, because it's a vast topic, as far as
mm-hmm.
like Red Dirt. When I moved to Stillwater in the early 90s, there was some Tom Skinner and Bob Childers and Red Dirt Rangers. They were playing music around there, and it was folky, and they called their music Red Dirt. And so I thought, man, I really like that. And I started running around those songwriter circles. And so when Great Divide came out, we called our music Red Dirt too, and kind of just jumped on their bandwagon, honestly. And then, I think from my own part of the big puzzle, I started going down to Texas, going to Robert Earl Keen shows, and trying to get Robert Earl Keen up to the Wormy Dog, and it just started infusing some Okies with Texans, and which has always happened.
Right.
I don't know if it ever really had a name, but yeah, it's interesting to see, and it's really weird for my kids to read that book. My youngest daughter is almost 18. She's like, I didn't know you did all this crap. Like, yeah, I was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But I think, you asked me if I think it's going to open up. I think absolutely it will, because there's some really great music in there, and there's a bunch of different kinds of music. I always felt like Ragweed was had a little more grunge infusion, to where Great Divide had a little more, I don't know, I don't want to use pop country, but a little more just classic rock maybe.
Yeah.
And then Jason Boland was more honky tonk, and Stoney LaRue more kind of a soul style. And the Red Dirt Rangers, they're just classic Red Dirt.
Yeah.
It's I think Kretschmer did a really good job interviewing people, and it was cool to see Garth Brooks in there because he was part of it too. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he talked highly of Tom Skinner, which did my heart good. Tom was my bass player and mentor for years, and what kind of got me into Red Dirt in the first place. So I think he really did a nice job. I'm proud of him. He's a good guy.
Yeah. You know,
he talked favorably of me, so of course I like him.
Well, you know, I think what's kind of amazing about Oklahoma in general is that, you know, you guys don't have the population of Texas, but there is still like such a diversity and such a richness of music history. You know, there's, you can call in all the Tulsa guys, right? Like the J.J. Cales and the Leon Russells, like that. The music history up there is just it's there if you want to discover it, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of independent spirits come out of Oklahoma because, you know, Oklahoma is where they tried to shove all the outlaws and tried to push all the Native Americans into, and the people that came up out of Oklahoma are pretty hard scrabbled, you know, not unlike Lubbock. You know, I know that our part of the world, there's some characters, man. And, you know, and it's characters that have come up out of, you know, facing everything from the Dust Bowl, you know, that's in the DNA, on down to, you know, the Great Depression. And, you know, that's the people who stayed and stuck it out. And they're pretty hard scrabbled people. So I think that is just part of the culture, and it comes out in the music.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things where it's 2020, but there's still pockets of this, of the United States where you can still see that pioneering spirit. And it goes down generations of going back to the Depression and the Dust Bowl. And, at some point, you know, you're the people before you moving out, during the pioneer days, right? Like when a lot of this was open frontier or open plains, and, you know, there may be a lot more fence line, a lot more roads out there, but you can still find that pioneering spirit.
I think so. I think it just is in your blood, you know, and you put a bunch of crazy people together and they have babies, you get crazy babies. And 9 times out of 10, they grab an instrument.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So, yeah, man, it's been really great talking with you today about this new record.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, I think like that's one of those little silver linings of this too, has been, you know, doing the podcast is I try to do all these in person before all this, and, you know, obviously that's out the window, and doing them on phone now, it means that there's more people to talk with, because you guys are just kind of stuck at home, and
we're waiting on a diversion. Come on, call me,
and all that, and then also you know, other people are stuck at home and they got to listen to something.
Yeah, look, you do a really great job, man.
All right, that's it for episode 122. Thanks to Mike. Y'all check out Looking Up this Friday. Check out Desert Door and the Blue Light Live. All right, I'll see y'all later this week for another episode.